The last thing that killed me was a giant cloth advertisement. The first thing that ruined my new life was another piece of cloth. I opened my eyes with the taste of rain in my mouth and 600 strangers laughing in front of me. One moment earlier, a storm had torn a smiling face from the side of a building. The advertisement had wrapped around my head, dragged me across a road, and delivered me under a truck with better timing than any assassin. Now I stood on a round stone platform beneath a clear blue sky. Towers surrounded the courtyard. Students in dark uniforms filled the seats. A crystal pillar waited in front of me, and a narrow silver badge rested against my chest. My memories arrived without asking permission. My name was Kiro. I was 16. I had grown up in a city shelter. I had earned 96 points out of 100 on the written entrance test to the Academy of Elements. The silver badge meant a full scholarship, a warm room, and 3 meals a day. It also meant someone richer wanted it. Examiner Herrick stepped onto the platform before I could touch the crystal. He was a broad man with a red collar and a beard trimmed into a sharp square. He looked at my badge, then at the row where the Academy sponsors sat. "Candidate Kiro," he said, "your scholarship lacks a second sponsor signature." The memory in my head told me that orphans needed only one signature. The rule had stood for 40 years. "The shelter director signed it," I said. "The rule changed this morning." A boy in the front row laughed. His name came from another borrowed memory. Roven, first son of the family that paid for the Academy's fire arena. Herrick pulled the badge from my chest. He did it slowly, so every student could watch. The ranking crystal behind him changed my written score from 96 to 0. My name dropped from 7th place to 600th. The laughter became louder. "You may still awaken," Herrick said. "If your combat potential reaches 60 points, the Academy may reconsider." The noble candidates had needed 20. I looked at the silver badge in his hand. It paid 30 silver each month. I had owned it for less than a minute in this life. "Understood," I said. Herrick seemed disappointed. He had probably prepared a speech for when I begged. I did not want to waste his work, but I had just been killed by a happy woman printed on a bedsheet. My standards for a bad morning had changed. I placed my palm on the crystal. Lightning had filled it for the candidate before me. Ice had covered it for the girl before him. When I touched it, the crystal gave a tired flash and produced a square of white cloth. It was as wide as my hand. It had no rune, no shine, and no visible edge. It simply lay across my fingers like a napkin that had taken a wrong turn. For 2 breaths, the courtyard went silent. Then, 600 people discovered the same joke. Roven leaned over the railing. "Careful, he might clean a table with it." Herrick took the cloth from me. He pulled once. It tore down the middle. "Material manifestation," he announced. "Lowest grade, combat potential, 0. The ranking crystal wrote those words beneath my name. Several students stood to see them better. One pointed at me while another pretended to wipe his face with a sleeve. Herrick dropped the 2 halves at my feet. "Basement residence, no stipend, no access to combat halls. Next candidate." A bell rang. I was pushed off the platform by an assistant before the next student climbed up. The girl created 3 silver knives. The crowd cheered before I reached the bottom stair. I picked up both pieces of cloth. The torn edges felt warm. That was the first thing nobody else noticed. The basement residents sat beneath the old dining hall. The door was shorter than I was. The corridor smelled of wet stone, and my room contained a bed that complained when I looked at it. A pipe crossed the ceiling. Water dripped from one joint into a bucket. There were 11 copper coins in my pocket. A bowl of soup upstairs cost 2. I set the torn cloth on the bed. The pieces moved. White threads stretched across the gap. They joined one by one until the square became whole again. A calm voice spoke inside my head. "Awakening confirmed. First path available. Element Weaver." The voice continued. The second path was Cloth Knight. The final path was Lord of Veils. The words did not appear in the air. There was no glowing window. I simply understood them, along with one sentence that changed the value of the useless thing on my bed. Cloth that survives magic will preserve one property of that magic. I waited for more. Nothing came. Very generous, I said. The instructions are almost longer than the product. The door opened behind me. A girl with short black hair stood there holding a metal tray. She wore the gray cuffs of the laboratory faculty. One lens of her glasses was round. The other had a crack through it. "Were you talking to the blanket?" she asked. "It has listened more carefully than the exam staff." She looked at the white square. "I saw Harek tear that." It recovered. She entered and placed the tray on my desk. It held a small burner, a glass manna gauge, a pair of iron tongs, and half a cheese roll. "I'm Naya," she said. "I study controlled spell pressure. I also live behind the boiler because my faculty believes windows make students lazy." "Kiro. I know. You were the most popular 0 on the ranking board." She said it without laughing. Her eyes stayed on the cloth. I told her the rule, not the 3 class names. Not yet. I only said the cloth might remember magic that failed to destroy it. Naya did not tell me I was mad. She pushed the cheese roll toward me and lit the burner. "Then we measure what destroys it." That was when she became the first person in this world I trusted. The laboratory occupied an abandoned storage room beside the boiler. Naya had repaired one testing table and stolen nothing except the items everyone else had thrown away. 3 cracked gauges hung on the wall. A training crystal sat in a box of sand. She released 1 unit of fire mana through the burner. The white cloth darkened at the center. A second later, the mark vanished. Naya touched it with the back of her finger. "Cold," she said. The burner flame still danced beneath it. She increased the pressure to 2 units, then 4. The cloth remained cold. At 6 units, white threads lifted from its surface and shone like fine wire, but the square survived. 7? Naya asked. "Use a corner." She folded one edge beneath the gauge and sent 7 units through it. The corner burst into pale dust. We both stared at the missing piece. The rest of the square stayed cold. Naya repeated every test with ordinary linen. 1 unit scorched it. 2 units set it on fire. At 4, the ash rose toward the ceiling. She wrote the results in a notebook. My cloth could hold 1 property. Its current property was resistance to heat. Its limit was 6 units. A 7th unit delivered at once destroyed the unprotected section. Once it had learned heat resistance, repeated fire below the limit caused no damage at all. That was useful, but 1 square would not stop a real spell. Rovin's casual firebolt had measured 24 units during the morning demonstration. A combat spell from Harek could pass 100. I needed more cloth. The answer came when I pushed mana into my palm. 2 units left my body. A new white square unfolded between my fingers. My total reserve was 12. I made 5 more squares and nearly fell against the table. 6 pieces per full reserve. Each could survive 6 units. If I spread an attack perfectly, I could handle 36 units. If one seam took too much, I would become a cooked scholarship student. Naya held up the first cold square. Her cracked lens had slipped down her nose. Harek called this 0. He tested it with his hands. That explains it. His hands are highly trained in paperwork. It was not a sophisticated joke. We were both tired, so it worked very well. We spent the next hour testing stitches. Naya could release fire in steps smaller than 1 unit. I could feel pressure moving through the threads. When 2 pieces overlapped, the first took 6 units and the second accepted the rest. A loose seam failed at 9. A crossed seam distributed 12 evenly. The result looked like a white kitchen glove. Berto, the old cook upstairs, was pulling a black tray from an oven when we entered. He used 3 folded rags and still cursed when the heat reached his fingers. I handed him our glove. "Try this." He looked at me, looked at the glove, and looked at Naya. "If this burns me, I'm feeding both of you boiled cabbage for a month." There were 32 students in the basement dining room. Every one of them turned to watch. Berto put on the glove and reached into the oven. He lifted the iron tray. He held it for 1 breath, then 2, then 10. His eyes widened. He carried the tray around the room while students touched the cold white fabric. Then he pulled a meat pie from the oven with his bare gloved hand and raised it above his head. The room erupted. Someone shouted that the Combat 0 had defeated an oven. Someone else replied that the oven had a higher academy rank than most of us. Berto bought 4 pieces for 12 silver. It was more money than I had held that morning. He also promised dinner for Naya and me. My strength had risen from 1 torn square to 6 working panels. My money had risen from 11 copper to 12 silver and 11 copper. My status had risen from public garbage to the only student the kitchen staff did not want to lose. It was a small beginning. Small beginnings became dangerous when 80 witnesses carried them upstairs. By evening, the main dining hall was full. Students from every faculty had come to see the white gloves. Berto stood beside the oven like a proud general commanding 4 very soft soldiers. Roven arrived with 2 friends and the expression of a man who had found dirt on his polished boot. "So the napkin found employment," he said. The students around him laughed because his family paid for half their uniforms. I was wearing the 2 remaining panels as a short mantle across my shoulders. Naya had sewn them together. The line was not straight, but neither was the pipe above my bed. Roven pointed at it. "Does that make you a kitchen knight?" "Not yet." His smile weakened. "Take it off." "Why?" "I want to show everyone what happens when trash meets real fire." "You already showed them this morning." More students turned toward us. A first-year student climbed onto a bench. Berto stepped out of the kitchen but did not interfere. He held an iron ladle like a club. Roven raised 1 finger. A flame gathered above it. Naya whispered, 6 units. The fire spark crossed the room and struck my left shoulder. The white cloth flashed orange. Heat spread over my uniform, stopped, and vanished. The mantle remained white. The room went silent. Roven's smile disappeared. I brushed a speck of soot from the cloth. "It seems your real fire has the same problem as Herek's hands." The basement students laughed first. Then the laboratory students joined them. Laughter rolled across the hall until even several noble candidates covered their mouths. Roven's ears turned red. "That was a spark." He formed a larger flame. "Try 12. Naya caught my eye. 2 panels, 6 units each. The seam had survived 12 during our test. I nodded. Roven fired. The spell struck the center of my chest. The crossed seam divided it. 6 units flowed left, 6 flowed right, both panels shone. My shoes slid half a step across the floor, but the heat never reached my skin. Behind me, a pot of cream sauce had begun to boil over. I took it from the stove with 1 corner of my mantle and placed it safely on the counter. 80 students watched me use Roven's attack to improve kitchen safety. Berto lifted his ladle. "Best combat lesson I've seen all year." The hall exploded with cheers. Roven stood with his hand still extended. His friends had moved 1 careful step away from him. The ranking board near the door did not change official scores, but a student had pinned a handwritten list beside it. The list was titled, "Useful Abilities Witnessed Today." My name moved above Roven's before we finished dinner. Herek appeared at the upper entrance just in time to see it. He looked at the cold mantle, the crowd, and the white gloves on Berto's hands. Then he looked at Roven. "Unauthorized magic in the dining hall," he said. Roven relaxed. Herek pointed at me. "Kiro will report for confiscation review at sunrise." The cheers died. "The attack was his," Naya said. "Roven was testing dangerous material," Herek replied. "The material will be secured. Any profit earned through it will be surrendered to the academy." He turned and left before the witnesses could begin shouting. Roven recovered enough of his smile to follow him. I counted what I had gained. 6 panels, 12 silver, 80 witnesses, 1 confiscation order. The last item was the most expensive. Berto served us thick beef stew after the hall emptied. The meat fell apart beneath the spoon. Carrots and onions had cooked in the broth until they were sweet. He cut a loaf of dark bread while it was still hot, spread butter over it, and added 2 cups of milk with honey. Naya sat across from me at a small kitchen table. She had already filled 7 pages with test results. "We could hide the cloth," she said. "Then Harek calls it proof of guilt. We could give it to him. Then Roven wears it at the tournament. We could wrap Herek in it and place him in the oven." I considered the idea while chewing bread. Berto would object. From the stove, Berto said, "Only if you do it before the pies are finished." We ate until the cold basement felt almost like a home. Naya divided the remaining silver into 3 piles: material, food, and emergency bail. I moved 2 coins from food to material. She moved them back. "A dead inventor has poor sales," she said. That was difficult to argue with. Near midnight, I returned to my room. The mantle hung from a nail beside the bed. Both panels carried 6 units of heat resistance. In the dark, their threads gave off a weak orange glow. Far above the basement, something moved. The giant white flag over the central tower had hung without wind all day. Now it turned toward my narrow window. A single thread slipped from its lowest edge. It passed through stone as if the wall were smoke. It crossed my room and touched the mantle. The calm voice inside my head returned. "Compatible cloth detected." I placed one hand on the glowing thread. Cold, heat, wind, lightning, healing, and thousands of other properties rushed through my senses. The amount of stored mana rose beyond 1,000, beyond 10,000, and continued climbing faster than I could count. Then another voice spoke through the thread. It sounded old, tired, and terrified. "Do not let them burn me tomorrow." At sunrise, Herrick arrived with 2 guards, a sealed evidence chest, and Rovan. The chest was large enough for my mantle. Rovan's smile was large enough for the rest of my room. I had not slept. The thread from the tower had vanished before dawn, but it had left one gray stitch in my white mantle. Every time I touched it, I felt a distant pressure above the academy. It was like standing beneath an ocean that had forgotten to fall. My mana reserve had also changed. The voice of the element weaver told me that a witness defense and an honest sale had strengthened my path. I now held 24 units instead of 12. The cloth still obeyed the same rule. 2 units created 1 square. 6 units was the limit of each square. My power had not become easier. I had simply received enough rope to make a larger knot. Herrick held out his hand. "All manifested material, all notes, all income." "The review is in the public laboratory," Naya said from the corridor. Herrick looked past me. "This is a confiscation, not a review." "You called it a confiscation review in front of 80 witnesses. I registered those words with the archive crystal." She lifted a small blue token. Rovan stopped smiling. "An official review required an independent judge and public observation." Naya had spent 4 silver to file the request before the archive office closed. It was half our money. She had not asked me because she knew I would call it expensive. She was right. It was also brilliant. The old laboratory held 120 students by the time we arrived. Another 50 watched through the open windows. A copy of the useful abilities list had been nailed beside the door. My name remained above Rovan's. Duran stood behind the testing table. He was the Academy's tournament judge, a narrow man with silver hair and no sponsor colors on his coat. He read Naya's 7 pages twice before looking at me. "You claim the cloth preserves one property of any magic it survives." "Yes, and one piece fails above 6 units. A raw piece fails. A protected piece keeps the property it learned, but it cannot hold a second." Herrick placed the evidence chest on the floor. "A hidden enchantment is the obvious explanation." Joran nodded. "Then we will find the rune, gem, ritual mark, or external mana source." Naya leaned close to me. "He enjoys obvious explanations. They make a loud sound when they break." I created a new square in front of everyone. 2 units left my reserve. White fabric unfolded from my palm. The room became quiet. Joran passed it through 3 detection rings. None reacted. He cut off 1 thread, placed it beneath a lens, and confirmed that there was no rune. Herrick inspected it himself. He found cloth. This seemed to offend him personally. "Fire is a simple resistance," he said. "Many low materials endure heat." "Then choose another element," I replied. Rovan spoke from the front row. "Wind." He expected the cloth to fly away or tear. I had expected the same thing, which was why Naya and I had tested it before the doors opened. Joran called a wind student to the table. She released 1 unit into the fresh square. The fabric rose from my hand and floated for 3 breaths before settling. At 2 units, it hung in the air. At 4, it pulled upward hard enough to lift a wooden spoon tied beneath it. At 6, it lifted an iron training weight that measured 4 units on the scale. The cloth had not stored wind as a moving gust. It had preserved the property of lightness. A square weighing less than 1 finger could cancel 4 units of downward force. 6 squares stitched across a training shield reduced its effective weight from 24 units to less than 1. I raised the shield with 2 fingers. The 120 students stood at the same time. A laboratory assistant checked the scale. Then she checked it again. Someone outside shouted the result to the crowd beneath the windows. The words crossed the courtyard faster than fire. Rovin's face looked as if the shield had landed on his foot. Harek pushed through the students and grabbed the upper edge. The shield jumped from my fingers and pulled his arm above his head. He tried to lower it. The wind cloth lifted harder when he tilted it. For several long breaths, the examiner who had written Combat Potential 0 stood in front of 170 witnesses, with a shield dragging him around like an excited dog. Joran took it from him. The laughter shook dust from the ceiling. Harek's face darkened. A trick with weight does not make it safe. He formed a flame in his palm. The gauge beside him climbed to 18 units. Naya moved toward me, but I had already prepared 3 fire-treated panels beneath my uniform. I pulled them free and crossed their seams over my forearm. "Judge," I said, "please record the pressure." Joran looked at Harek. "The candidate has consented to a controlled test. 18 units, no more." Harek fired before he finished speaking. The flame covered my arm. The first panel accepted 6 units. The second took 6. The third took the final 6. For a moment, the fabric shone bright orange from wrist to elbow. Then the fire vanished. My sleeve remained white. My skin remained cool. The gauge stopped at exactly 18. The room did not laugh this time. It roared. Students pushed toward the table. They wanted to touch the cloth, see my arm, and read Naya's notes. The assistant at the window shouted that the Combat 0 had blocked an examiner. The crowd outside repeated it until the words reached the main courtyard. Joran lifted one hand. "The material contains no illegal enchantment. It uses no gem, rune, or borrowed artifact. Under Academy law, it is a personal manifestation." Harek stared at him. "The law was written for weapons. Then it should not have called itself Academy law." Joran turned to the archive crystal. "I record Cairo's measured defensive output at 18 units with 3 panels. His material creation, load control, and elemental adaptation qualify for 38 combat points. His 0 classification is withdrawn." My name rose from 600th place to 218th. The crystal changed in front of everyone. Outside, 2,000 students could see the main ranking board. A wave of noise moved across the academy when my name jumped. I could not see the board from the laboratory, but I heard each courtyard react in order. First came surprise, then disbelief, then the basement students began chanting my name. Harek closed the empty evidence chest. 38 points do not restore a scholarship, he said. "I know. You still have no combat hall access. I know. And material sold on academy grounds requires a vendor license." Joran placed a paper on the table. "Approved this morning." Naya had filed that too. Harek looked at her. "How much did all this cost?" 8 silver. He looked at me. "You had 12. Now I have 4. You spent 2/3 of your money on paper." "Yes," I said. "It survived you." Even Joran laughed at that. Harek left the laboratory while 170 people watched him carry his unused evidence chest. Rovin followed several steps behind. The shield he had chosen for the test still floated above the table. The public humiliation did not make Harek harmless. It made him careful. He stopped at the door and turned back. "Sponsors pay for visible power," he said. "This academy cannot feed 600 uncertain talents. Every weak result costs rooms, instructors, and medicine. If I remove 10 failures and protect 1 proven fire mage, the academy survives." For the first time, the room became quiet for him rather than against him. His motive was real. His method was still theft. "Then publish the price," I said. "Do not call the auction an exam." Harek's jaw tightened. He left without answering. By noon, 3 different faculties wanted samples. The healing faculty offered tests. The construction faculty wanted light ropes. The kitchen wanted more gloves before Berto's assistants began fighting over the first 4. Joran approved a safety order for 6 heat-proof rescue wraps. The Academy paid 30 silver for each one. That was 1 gold and 80 silver. Berto paid another 20 silver for 2 oven sleeves. My total reached 2 gold and 4 silver after filing costs and food. The money looked heavy on the table. The wind-treated shield beside it did not. I spent 1 gold on a used foot loom, 3 steel needles, fireproof thread, and access to Naya's laboratory for a month. The seller laughed when I asked whether the loom had ever exploded. Only once, he said. I bought it because honest tools were rare. My new mana reserve created 12 panels that day. Added to the 6 from the first day, Berto's gloves included, our total defensive capacity reached 108 units. I did not own all of those panels anymore, but each sale proved the rule publicly. My power had become a product made allies faster than an argument. The Academy notice board reflected that by afternoon. One message called me the Napkin Mage, another called me the Oven Champion. A third offered 5 silver for underclothes that resisted cold. Naya removed that request before I could calculate the profit. Some research should remain unfunded, she said. We took 4 fresh panels to the Wind Court. Without combat hall access, I could not use the official spell launchers, but the natural vent behind the western tower produced measured gusts. Naya tied 1 panel to each shoulder, 1 across my back, and 1 around my waist. At 6 units of stored lightness per panel, my body felt 24 units lighter. I ran. My first step covered twice the normal distance. My second lifted me over a bench. My third carried me into a hedge. 30 students watched my legs disappear into the leaves. Naya stood above me with her notebook. Speed increased. Control decreased. Pride? Stable. It started low. She offered me her hand. I took it, and she pulled me from the hedge. We tested until I could shorten my steps and turn without meeting plants. Wind cloth did not make me stronger. It changed the weight my muscles had to move. If I jumped too hard, I stayed in the air long enough for an enemy to prepare a chair and wait for me to land. The advantage needed practice. That pleased me. Easy power made easy mistakes. As sunset approached, the central bell called every student into the main courtyard. Rector Valor appeared on the tower balcony. He wore a white robe with gold seams. Above him, the giant flag hung from a horizontal mast. It covered 3 floors of the tower and showed the Academy crest in faded red thread. The gray stitch in my mantle became cold. Valor raised both hands. Tomorrow begins the annual Element Tournament. We will renew the protection of our city as our founders did 300 years ago. Assistants carried a bronze bowl onto the balcony. Blue fire burned inside it. At the opening ceremony, Valor continued, the worn lower edge of our sacred flag will be cut away and purified in Founder's flame. The crowd cheered. The flag did not move, but its terror passed through the gray stitch and into my chest. Do not let them burn me tomorrow. Naya saw my expression. What is it? That flag is the same cloth. She looked up. That is impossible. It has spent 300 years surviving the magic of this city. Her face lost its color. Ordinary fabric would release nothing when burned. My fabric preserved what it survived. The lower edge alone might hold thousands of properties and more mana than the entire fire arena. Before I could explain, the ranking board flashed. A tournament challenge appeared beneath my name. Rovin had invoked a sponsor privilege. He had selected me as his first opponent. His registered signature spell was a fire lance measured at 72 units. The match would take place during the opening ceremony. If I refused, I would lose my vendor license and my new rank. If I accepted, I would enter the arena with no combat hall training and 14 panels I could still control. Around us, students read the challenge aloud. Some laughed. Others looked at the white mantle and began making bets. Rovin stood near the sponsor seats. He raised one hand and drew a line of fire through the air. 72 bright sparks counted the power of his spell. Herrick stood beside him. He no longer carried an evidence chest. He carried the tournament entry form with my name already written on it. That evening, Berto served chicken soup with thick noodles, soft carrots, and pieces of roasted meat. He added fried potatoes with salt and green herbs. Naya brought an apple pie from the laboratory faculty. The crust cracked beneath the knife, and hot cinnamon steam filled the basement kitchen. We placed 12 new white panels between the bowls. 72 units means 12 fire panels, Naya said. If he hits one place, the outer piece receives more than 6 before the seam spreads it. Then we need faster distribution. And the flag? She looked toward the ceiling. If they cut it, we need to know what burning releases. Berto set down 3 cups of tea. Can your cloth survive that blue founder's flame? I don't know. Can you beat Rovan? I don't know. He nodded. Good. People who know everything never wash their cups. We ate first. Then we worked. Naya drew a web of crossed seams across my mantle. I fed fire resistance into 8 panels and lightness into 4. Berto cut narrow leather channels so pressure could travel around my shoulders instead of through my heart. At midnight, the ancient thread returned. This time Naya saw it pass through the wall. It touched the gray stitch. A pattern entered my mind, not words. A memory of tension, cuts, and hidden seams. Someone had sewn a black extraction thread through the center of the flag. It pulled a small part of every spell cast in the city into the tower. The cloth had not been protecting the city. It had been feeding on it. The old voice whispered again. When they cut me, the fire will wake what is inside. The tournament bell rang once in the darkness. Far above us, 72 sparks appeared around Rovan's balcony. Then the lowest edge of the giant flag began to bleed blue flame. Only the gray stitch revealed the blue fire. Naya's gauge stopped above 500 units. 3 treated panels delayed it for 3 breaths before the tower nearly broke them. We need more than the whole armor, I said. My reserve had grown again after the public review. It now held 48 units. At dawn, I created 24 new panels. The process left my hands numb and my stomach empty, but our total production reached 42. Together, the cloth could distribute 252 units if every seam accepted exactly 6. That was a beautiful number. It was also 1/4 of the pressure I could feel in the flag's lower edge. Naya treated 12 panels with fire. 8 received wind until they pulled upward. 6 were exposed to cold in the storage vault and became cold enough to frost the table. The remaining panels stayed raw so we could adapt them during the match. We worked until the eastern sky became gray. 4 guards blocked the tower. They saw no fire and ordered us to the arena. Behind them, a lift carried Velor, Herrick, and the bowl of Founder's flame upward. Velor noticed my mantle. His calm expression slipped for one breath. He knew what my cloth was. 4,000 people filled the arena, and viewing crystals carried the match across the city. Rovan's crest covered the sponsor banners. The basement students answered with Berto's white oven sleeve tied to a broom. Laughter turned into cheers when the kitchen staff raised 4 hot trays with protected hands. Joran waited at the center of the arena. Herrick stood near the sponsor platform as the official examiner. Rovan entered through the fire gate wearing a red combat coat, gold boots, and a ruby focus on his chest. His coat had enough metal decoration to anchor a boat. He raised both arms. Flames formed a crown above his head. The sponsor section shouted his name. I walked in wearing a white mantle made from 32 panels. It covered my shoulders, chest, arms, and legs in overlapping strips. Naya had left 8 loose tails behind me so wind could pull them during movement. The crowd became quiet, then noisy in a different way. The cloth looked soft. The seams made it move like armor. Rovan pointed at the basement banner. Did the kitchen send you to wash the arena? They sent me to collect something that overheated. The students in the lower seats understood first. Their laughter spread upward. Joran checked our equipment. He found no gems or runes in my mantle. He measured Rovan's ruby focus at a maximum support of 48 units. His registered fire lance is 72, I said. The remaining 24 comes from his reserve, Joran replied. The focus is legal sponsor equipment. And my cloth? Personal manifestation. Legal. Herrick stepped forward. Contact with the sacred flag, ceremony platform, or Founder's flame will cause immediate disqualification. The lower edge of the giant flag hung above the northern wall. Through the gray stitch, I saw blue fire creeping closer to its corner. They had placed the match directly beneath it. Rovan saw me look up. His smile returned. Duran raised his hand. Victory by surrender, loss of consciousness, or leaving the ring. Begin. Rovan did not test me with a spark. He formed the fire lance at once. Red and gold power twisted into a spear while the sponsor seats counted. At 72, Rovan threw it. I crossed both arms. The lance struck the center of my mantle. The seam spread pressure over my shoulders, ribs, waist, and legs. The center briefly held 12 and burned my chest. I twisted, sending 6 excess units into a raw panel before it tore. All 72 units vanished into 12 pieces of cloth. The lance disappeared. I remained standing. The arena forgot how to make sound. Rovan's empty hand stayed extended. Duran looked at the gauge, then at my mantle. 72 units received. 0 passed through the inner layer. Naya stood beside the laboratory team. She pointed at the thin burn on my chest. Almost 0, she shouted. That broke the silence. 4,000 people rose. The basement students waved their oven sleeve until the broom snapped. Outside the arena, bells rang as students relayed the gauge result across the city. The public ranking crystal flashed my defensive record beside Rovan's offensive record. They were equal. The candidate Harek had rated at 0 had stopped the favorite's signature spell in the first exchange. Rovan heard his own sponsor section whispering. That hurt him more than losing mana. You stood still, he said. A training dummy could do that. A training dummy would cost more. The lower seats laughed again. Rovan pulled power through his focus. The ruby glowed too brightly. He fired 6 smaller bolts, each measured at 12 units. This time I moved. The wind panels reduced my effective weight by 32 units. I stepped sideways and crossed 10 paces before the first bolt reached me. The second passed beneath my arm. The third struck a loose tail and added fire resistance to it. The fourth scorched the arena floor. The fifth followed my turn. I jumped. The wind cloth pulled upward. I rose over the bolt, over Rovan's head, and much higher than I had planned. For 2 breaths, I hung above the arena with my arms spread and 8 white tails floating behind me. Someone in the upper seats shouted, "The napkin can fly!" "Not well," I shouted back. Gravity remembered me. I landed behind Rovan. The impact drove pain through both knees, but the cold panels tightened around them and reduced the swelling. Before he turned, I fastened 1 wind-treated strip beneath the back of his red coat. Rovan spun and fired the 6th bolt at my face. I caught it with 2 crossed panels. The spectators close enough to see stepped back. Fire wrapped around my hands, turned the cloth orange, and vanished. I closed my fingers around the fading spell as if I had crushed it. That image traveled through every viewing crystal in the city. Rovan heard the crowd change sides. His next decision came from anger rather than calculation. He unlocked the ruby focus. Duran's expression sharpened. Maximum legal output is 72. I'm not using a registered spell, Rovan said. Flame rolled from his coat and formed a circle around the arena. The gauge passed 72. It reached 90, then 120. Harek did not stop him. Crown blaze, Rovan said. Let's see your blanket hold this. The circle closed. I had enough panels to distribute 120 units, but not after the first attack. Several seams were damaged. If the pressure reached my chest again, I would lose more than a scholarship. I ran toward Rovan instead of away. The wind cloth pulled me forward. He released Crown Blaze. A wall of fire rushed across the ring behind me. Heat struck my back. 6 panels filled at once. 1 seam snapped, another held. The white tails streamed like burning flags. Rovan raised his hands to meet me with a final blast. I grabbed the gold chain across his chest and pulled myself close. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "Improving your coat." I fastened 3 more wind panels to it. 4 panels canceled 16 units of his weight. My 8 canceled 32 of mine. When his final blast struck my crossed arms, I tilted the seams downward. The force pushed both of us toward the edge. My boots touched the ground. His gold boots did not. Rovan floated just high enough to lose traction. He waved his arms, fired another burst, and launched himself backward like a very angry balloon. He crossed the boundary, struck a sponsor banner, and landed inside the padded equipment cart. The cart rolled down the passage with his legs sticking out of it. Joran stared after him for one breath. Then he raised my hand. Rovan has left the ring. Kiro wins. The arena erupted. The basement students chanted. Laboratory students threw paper notes into the air. Berto climbed onto the front rail and beat his ladle against a shield. Even the sponsor section stood, although several people looked as if standing had happened against their will. The ranking board moved my name from 218th to 32nd. My victory prize was 10 gold. My vendor orders tripled before I left the ring. The archive crystal recorded the first official tournament defeat of a signature fire spell by material manifestation. Rovan climbed from the equipment cart in time to see every change. His red coat still carried 4 white wind panels. Each time he tried to walk, they lifted the back of it over his head. 2 assistants had to hold him down while they removed them. Herrick stepped into the arena. Kiro interfered with ceremonial property. The blue fire had reached the lowest corner of the giant flag while we fought. One of my burning white tails had touched it when Crown Blaze crossed the ring. Through that contact, my seam network had spread. The ancient flag pulled heat resistance from my panels into its lower edge. The blue flame stopped less than a hand from the cut line. To ordinary eyes, the white tail had merely brushed the flag. Herrick pointed upward. Contact means disqualification. Joran walked to the gauge archive. He replayed the final exchange through the viewing crystal. Rovan's crown blaze reached the flag first. My mantle touched it 2 breaths later. If contact is disqualifying, Joran said, Rovan lost before he left the ring. The crowd heard every word. Herrick looked toward Rector Velor's balcony. Velor stood beside the founder's flame. He did not look at Rovan. He looked at the gray stitch in my mantle. The victory remains, he announced. Rovan's family crest vanished from the main viewing crystal. Sponsor privilege could force 1 challenge each year. A loss through that privilege canceled it for the rest of the tournament. Rovan had spent his family's public power to place himself in an equipment cart. He stopped fighting the assistants and stared at me. There was anger in his face, but something else had joined it. Fear. He had known about the fire near the flag. He had not known what the flag would do when my cloth touched it. Neither had I. The calm voice inside my head spoke while thousands cheered. Official victory confirmed. Second path awakened. Cloth night. No new rule appeared. The cloth still remembered only what it survived. The change was in my awareness. I felt every panel joined to my mantle. I felt pressure in each stitch, the exact place where a seam weakened, and the shortest path toward an empty square. What Naya and I had built through calculation became something I could sense like my own fingers. That did not remove the limit of 6 units. It allowed me to respect it faster. The Founder's Flame ceremony was postponed because the lower edge had failed its safety inspection. Joran ordered 3 independent gauges placed on it. Each gauge struck its limit. For the first time in 300 years, the Academy admitted that it did not know how much power its own flag contained. Herrick's name disappeared from the tournament control list pending review. Students surrounded him as he left. They asked why the ceremony had begun before dawn. They asked why Rovan had been allowed 120 units. They asked who had ordered the flag heated. He answered none of them. Public anger followed him across the courtyard. It was quieter than laughter, and much heavier. Naya reached me beside the medical gate. She pressed a cold cloth against the burn on my chest. "You said 72, she told me. "He was bad at counting. You jumped over a firebolt. The ground was occupied. You attached experimental wind cloth to another student. It worked." She tried to remain angry. Then Rovan passed us with 2 assistants holding his coat down, and she laughed so hard that the medical cloth slipped from her hand. We returned to the basement after sunset. Berto had spent part of my prize before asking. He bought a long wooden table for the empty storage room and called it our workshop. On the table waited roasted chicken with crisp golden skin. Garlic potatoes filled a deep bowl. There were green beans cooked in butter, warm rolls, and small apple pastries covered with sugar. 30 basement students squeezed into the room. They had watched my score become 0. Now they watched Berto place 10 gold coins in front of me. I paid Naya back 8 silver for the filings. I paid Berto 1 gold for food, the table, and the foot loom. I put 2 gold into materials, 2 into emergency medicine, and 5 into a locked box beneath the floor. My money had risen to 12 gold and 4 silver. My reserve had doubled. My output had reached 42 panels and 252 units. My public rank was 32nd. The numbers were good. The food was better. Naya tore a roasted leg in half and placed the larger piece on my plate. For the burn. Does chicken heal fire damage? This one costs 6 silver. It should heal anything. After dinner, the others left one by one. Naya stayed to repair the inner seam of my mantle. Her fingers were precise. When the needle passed near the burn on my chest, she slowed. "You could have died," she said. "I knew the limit. You knew 12 panels could hold 72. You did not know what anger would add." I looked at the blackened seam. "Then tomorrow I plan for anger." She tied the final knot. "Plan for mine too." The gray stitch became cold before I could answer. The ancient flag pulled my awareness upward. This time the connection carried a number, 1,048,576 units. That was how much mana the flag had stored. The amount increased by 1 every few breaths as spells were cast across the sleeping city. Naya touched the stitch beside my hand. Through my cloth knight awareness, I let her feel the pressure. She stopped breathing for a moment. "If the lower edge releases 500, she whispered. "What happens if the center tears?" The workshop door opened. Rector Velor entered alone. His white robe had a line of blue ash across one sleeve. He looked at the new table, the repaired mantle, and the locked coin box beneath the loose floorboard. His eyes missed very little. "Congratulations on your victory," he said. Beneath his gold collar, a black thread disappeared into his skin. It was the same thread sewn through the heart of the ancient flag. Velor closed the door behind him. "Tomorrow," he said, "you will fight the Academy Guardian in the final. It strikes with 300 units of lightning." Naya rose. "The final was scheduled for next week. The schedule changed this evening." Velor's gaze stayed on my gray stitch. "Win, and I will restore your scholarship." "Refuse, and I will burn every piece of white cloth in this basement before sunrise." Velor expected fear. I gave him a chair. "Sit," I said. "Threats become tiring when delivered while standing." Naya looked at me as if I had offered tea to a wolf. Velor looked at the chair as if no student had ever discovered one before. He remained on his feet. "Why 300 units?" I asked. "The Guardian was built to test the strongest graduate. I awakened 3 days ago. Then your rise has been very inconvenient." The black thread tightened when Velor admitted that the Capital Inspector expected an extraction tomorrow night. Each year, Founder's Flame removed a loaded section for the Capital. The Academy called it protection because the true word was tax. "You want the Guardian's lightning to force my mantle into contact with the flag," I said. "I want proof that your cloth can carry a large load without rupture. And if it cannot, the problem ends with you." "Honest," Naya said coldly. Velor said the Academy spent 300 gold each week. Without capital payment, laboratories closed, shelter students left first, and the city lost its barrier. His motive held thousands of lives and my corpse. "I will fight," I said. Naya turned toward me. I required a public final, Duran's gauges, archived rules, an instant prize transfer, and safety for our cloth. Velor agreed. He left without sitting. Naya waited until his steps faded. "You agreed to stand in front of 300 units. We have 90 panels by morning. Only if your reserve doubles again." The voice of the Cloth Knight answered before I could. My mana reserve had reached 96. I could create 48 new panels. Naya heard my answer in my expression. "I dislike your calm face," she said. "It saves time. One day I will write something rude on it." We had less than 8 hours. The Academy Guardian used lightning. Ordinary insulation was not enough. A 300-unit strike would choose the shortest path through my chest. We needed the cloth to teach that path another direction. At 6 units, the laboratory coil taught a panel to guide lightning between 2 corners. That was useful if the second corner ended somewhere other than my heart. We stitched 40 lightning panels into long veins along the outside of the armor. Every path began at my shoulders or arms, and ended in 2 cloth tails that dragged across the arena floor. 10 fire panels covered my chest. 6 wind panels reduced my weight. 6 cold panels protected my knees and slowed metal joints if I could reach the Guardian. That used 62 panels. The remaining 28 became replacements, test pieces, and one inner layer that Naya refused to explain until she carried it to the restoration crystal. The crystal released healing magic in 1-unit pulses. It was designed to close cuts on laboratory animals. Naya placed a panel beneath it. The first pulse left a soft green glow in the threads. She cut her own finger with a needle and pressed the cloth against it. The cut closed. I took the needle from her. Do not test unknown magic on yourself. You said that while preparing to wear 62 unknown panels against a Guardian. That is different. Because you are taller? The healing property restored 1 unit each minute, up to the 6-unit pattern it had survived. 4 inner panels could close burns and keep damaged muscles working. We had stopped assuming that magic needed to hurt. Naya sewed the green panels inside the chest and knees. Her face was close to mine while she tied the last seam. If the outer network fails, step away, she said. The Guardian will follow. Then run out of the ring. That loses the scholarship. A scholarship is easier to replace than you. She pulled the knot too tightly. Understood, I said. The final began at noon. All 12,000 seats were full. More people stood on nearby roofs. Viewing crystals had been placed in the market, the shelter district, and every academy dining hall. The sponsor banners were gone from the northern wall. In their place hung the giant white flag. Its lower edge no longer burned blue. The fire had moved inside. The Guardian entered through a stone gate. It stood 3 times my height. Bronze plates covered its arms and chest. A blue crystal filled the center of its head. Copper chains dragged behind both feet and sparked against the floor. The audience cheered for it because people enjoyed large machines when they were pointed at someone else. Joran met me at the center line. He inspected all 90 panels. He confirmed that none contained a rune, gem, or outside source. He tested the healing layer and recorded it as preserved restorative property. Velor watched from the tower balcony. Herrick sat below him without an examiner's collar. His review had removed his authority, but required him to witness the final. Rovan sat beside the fire faculty with his red coat tied firmly around his waist. I had defeated both of them. Neither looked happy to see a larger object attempt the same job. Joran read the rules aloud. The Guardian will release 1 strike measured at 300 units. The candidate must remain conscious, cross the arena, and hold the Guardian's chest seal for 3 breaths. Any second strike, outside control, or pressure above 300 units invalidates the test. Victory transfers 30 gold, 6 gold of scholarship back payment, and first place in the student ranking. The terms appeared on every archive crystal. 12,000 witnesses repeated the final number, 300. I walked to the southern mark. The Guardian lowered both arms. Lightning gathered between its palms. The outer veins of my armor touched the arena floor. I felt all 40 paths through my cloth knight awareness. Each could guide 6 units. Together, they carried 240. 10 fire panels and the raw replacements could absorb the remaining 60 if the distribution stayed balanced. There was no spare capacity. The Guardian fired. White light filled the arena. The strike hit both my arms. Lightning entered the first cloth veins and raced over my shoulders. 20 paths carried it left. 20 carried it right. The tails behind me struck the stone and released blue sparks into the ground. The first 100 units vanished, then 200. At 240, the outer veins filled. The remaining power reached my chest. 6 fire panels flashed. 4 raw panels learned lightning in the instant before they tore. 1 seam passed 8 units into my left side. Pain stopped my heart. The healing layer glowed green. My heart struck once, then again. The gauge reached 300. The lightning ended. I was still standing. Smoke rose from my shoulders. Both cloth tails had carved black lines across the arena floor. My left hand would not close, but the inner panel was already restoring it 1 unit at a time. Joran faced the main gauge. 300 units received. Candidate conscious. The crowd did not cheer immediately. They needed time to understand that the white figure inside the smoke was me. Then Berto raised the broken broom with the oven sleeve tied to it. The lower seats exploded. The sound hit the arena walls and came back twice as loud. Students stamped their feet. People on the roofs waved white sheets from windows. In the market viewing crystal, merchants threw cloth over their stalls. The whole city seemed to have found a napkin at the same time. Herrick watched the Combat Zero survive 300 units. Rovan looked at the public record beside his own 72. He slowly lowered his eyes. Velour did not celebrate. I began crossing the arena. The Guardian had already fired its legal strike, but its body remained active. It swung one bronze arm. I used the wind panels and moved beneath it. The fist struck the floor behind me. I fastened two cold panels around its wrist joint. Frost spread over the hinge. The next swing became slower. The Guardian kicked. I jumped, stayed in the air too long, and caught the edge of its knee with both hands. I attached 4 wind panels behind the joint. They could not lift the machine, but they reduced the downward force on one side. When the Guardian stepped, its foot landed too lightly. The bronze body tilted. I ran up the slanted leg. The audience counted each step. 1, 2, 3, 4. I reached the waist. The Guardian raised its frozen arm. I crossed onto the elbow before it struck. Wind pulled my mantle upward. I landed against the chest. My right hand touched the seal. 1, Joran called. The Guardian shook hard enough to tear one shoulder seam. 2. The black thread in the giant flag moved. It passed through the northern wall, entered the Guardian's back, and connected to its head crystal. 3. The seal turned green. The ranking board began moving my name. Then the Guardian fired again. 600 units of lightning erupted from its chest at a distance shorter than my arm. The illegal strike threw me across the arena. My full outer network was already loaded. 20 panels burst. The gray stitch pulled toward the flag. I opened every surviving seam and let the ancient cloth take the pressure. Lightning crossed my mantle, traveled through the gray thread, and struck the lower corner of the giant flag. The flag unfolded. For the first time in 300 years, it left the tower mast. A wave of white cloth spread over the northern seats without touching a single spectator. Blue lightning ran across its faded crest. Fire, wind, ice, and healing light flashed inside layers that had looked empty a moment before. The city saw what it had been feeding. The illegal 600 units disappeared into the flag. One lower corner tore. The sound was soft. The reaction was not. Every viewing crystal displayed the Guardian gauge. The legal line ended at 300. A second line rose to 600 after Joran had called the third breath. The archive identified an outside control thread leading to the rector's balcony. 12,000 faces turned toward Velour. He stood with one hand pressed against the black seam beneath his collar. "Emergency stabilization," he said. His voice reached every crystal. Joran replayed the rule. Any second strike or outside control invalidates the test. The candidate completed the final before the violation. Kiro wins. The ranking board placed me first. 30 gold transferred to my account. 6 gold of back payment followed. The silver scholarship badge appeared from the archive vault and flew across the arena toward me. I caught it with my working hand. My total wealth reached 48 gold and 4 silver. My armor had survived 900 units across 2 strikes, although half of it lay in smoking pieces. My status had moved from 600th to 1st in 4 days. The city reacted to all 3 numbers at once. Students cheered my name. Merchants shouted offers for protective cloth. The shelter district rang cooking pots together. On the sponsor platform, people stepped away from Velour until he stood alone. Rovan looked at the second gauge and shouted, "That was not part of the match." It was the first time he had spoken for me. Herrick removed the red examiner collar from his lap and dropped it on the floor. I did not authorize the Guardian. Velour had threatened me in private. His public machine had exposed him more efficiently than any accusation. His humiliation stood 12,000 seats tall. Then the torn flag began to scream through my gray stitch. The black extraction thread had opened with the corner. Stored pressure flowed toward the tear. the flag pulled itself back around the tower to hold its own layers together. Velour recovered before the crowd did. "Kiro has damaged the city barrier," he announced. "Under emergency authority, he is detained until the capital inspection." Guards entered from every gate. The crowd shouted against them. Joran raised the archived rules. Naya ran onto the arena floor and stood between me and the first guard. I touched her shoulder. "Let them," I said. "They fired 600 units after you won." And everyone saw it. The guards hesitated when I held out my hands. They had watched the same match. 2 looked ashamed. 1 quietly returned the scholarship badge after another guard tried to take it. I was led from the arena while 12,000 witnesses chanted first place. No prison walk had ever sounded so much like a victory parade. The cell beneath the tower was cleaner than my old room. It had a real window, a dry ceiling, and a mattress that did not complain. Becoming the Academy's most dangerous prisoner had improved my housing. Naya arrived after sunset with Joran's permission. She carried a covered tray and my damaged mantle. "Berto said prisoners need dinner," she told the guard. The tray held a hot meat pie. The crust was dark gold and filled with beef, onion, and thick gravy. A bowl of clear broth smelled of roasted bones and herbs. Beneath the bread were 2 small pastries with berry jam. Naya sat on the floor outside the bars. We divided the pie through the gap. "You are first in the academy," she said. "The room is better. You have 48 gold. The door is worse. The entire city watched Velour cheat. That may improve the door." She smiled, but her hands did not stop repairing the gray stitch. The healing panels had closed the burn across my chest. They had also repaired several damaged threads when pressed against the mantle. Preserved healing treated the cloth itself as readily as skin. That would matter. At midnight, bells sounded beyond the city wall. A white carriage entered the academy through the capital gate. Black elemental seals covered its sides. Students gathered in the courtyard despite the guards. Savin, the capital inspector, stepped out wearing a coat made from glossy black fabric. The ancient flag recoiled above him. Through the gray stitch, I felt the black extraction thread begin pulling 1,000 units from the flag each minute. It was no longer waiting for a controlled ceremony. Savin had started a forced harvest. Naya held the gauge against my mantle. The needle climbed without stopping. "How long?" she asked. I followed the pressure through every ancient seam. The tear widened with each 1,000 units. When it reached the central crest, everything the flag had stored would release at once. "Until sunrise," I said. Footsteps approached the cell. Savin stopped outside the bars. Velour stood behind him with the black thread cutting deeper into his neck. The inspector looked at my first-place badge and smiled. "At dawn," he said, "the city will watch your public trial. At the end of it, you will surrender your class, your cloth, and responsibility for the flag." Above us, the ancient seam split another inch. "If I refuse?" I asked. Savin's black coat moved even though the air was still. "Then there will be no city left to disagree." "Then you should hope I disagree quickly," I said. Savin's smile became thinner. He turned away. Velour followed him, pulled by the black thread like a man wearing an invisible chain. The guard waited until their steps faded, then he unlocked the small opening beneath the bars. "I saw the second strike," he said. "If you need something passed outside, I did not see that." Public victories had strange rewards. Sometimes they were gold, sometimes they were a guard deciding not to look down. My reserve had doubled one final time. The cloth knight now held 192 units. I pushed 2 units at a time into my palms. Naya received each new square through the opening. By the time the eastern sky began to pale, I had created 96 panels. My lifetime production reached 186. Their combined limit was 1,116 units. That sounded enormous until the flag above us lost 1,000 units each minute. We would not catch the flood. We had to close the broken gate. Naya carried the panels into the courtyard. Berto woke every basement student, and Joran opened the laboratories. Rovin agreed to testify about the order to aim Crown Blaze toward the flag. Herrick brought a sealed instruction blaming me before the final had even begun. Neither man asked for forgiveness. Both brought useful evidence. Naya divided the new panels. 40 received healing from the restoration crystals. 20 became lightning guides. 20 stored wind lightness. 10 learned fire resistance. 6 stayed raw. Berto and the basement students stitched them into 4 long bands. 1 ran from the trial square to the tower gate. 1 climbed the western roof. 1 ended at the laboratory grounding rods. The last remained folded beneath the public platform. Each panel could still carry only 6 units. The network was not strong enough to hold the flag. It was strong enough to carry a precise property to a precise tear. That was all sewing had ever been. At dawn, the central square held 30,000 people. Students filled the stairs and balconies. Families crowded behind the gates, and viewing crystals carried the trial across the city. White sheets, towels, and 1 pair of very large trousers hung from windows in support. The ancient flag wrapped the central tower above us. Its torn corner released blue sparks. Through my gray stitch, I counted the forced harvest. Savin had already taken 360,000 units into the black carriage. The flag still held more than 600,000. The tear had reached halfway to the central crest. Savin waited on the public platform with Velor, Joran, and Harek. Naya guarded the folded network beneath the stairs. 4 guards led me into the square while the crowd chanted first place. Savin lifted 1 hand. The black coat spread behind him and silenced every viewing crystal. His fabric had preserved a property of magical suppression. It carried no visible rune. It was made from the same ancient weave as the flag. He had his own version of my so-called trash. "Kiro," he announced, "you manifested restricted founder material, interfered with the annual renewal, and caused damage valued at 1 million gold. Under council law, your class and all connected cloth returned to the capital." The crowd reacted to the price first. 1 million gold was not a fine. It was a number designed to make innocence irrelevant. Savin continued. "Confess, and the council will stabilize the flag. Refuse, and its failure belongs to you." I looked at the flag. The black extraction thread pulled another 1,000 units from it. "Stop harvesting during the trial," I said. "The harvest is an emergency response. It began when you entered the city, because you damaged the flag. Then let the archive speak." Joran raised the tournament crystal. Savin's coat suppressed its image. I touched the gray stitch. The strip hidden beneath the platform connected to Naya's lightning band. 6 units of stored guidance traveled into the crystal cable. Instead of fighting the suppression, it carried the archive signal around it. Every white cloth in the square became a screen. 30,000 witnesses saw Joran count the 3rd breath before the legal gauge stopped at 300. Then the black control thread entered the Guardian and drove the 2nd gauge to 600. The image followed it to Valor's balcony. Savin could silence 1 crystal, not a city of compatible cloth. Rovin faced his angry family and admitted that Harek had ordered him to aim Crown Blaze toward the flag. "Kiro won," he finished. "I lost." His sponsor mark vanished, but the crowd applauded his testimony. Harek displayed Savin's sealed order blaming me before the final began. He also admitted altering scholarships for sponsor families. The ranking board restored my written score of 96 and reopened review for 43 shelter students. Harek's record changed to suspended while all 600 candidates watched. Savin's black coat snapped in the windless air. "Irregular admissions do not change council ownership." "No," I said. "The flag does." Naya lifted the laboratory gauge. It showed the extraction rate. 1,000 units each minute flowed toward Savin's carriage. "The flag did not lose pressure after the tear," she announced. "It lost pressure after the inspector arrived. At this rate, the forced harvest reaches the central seam at sunrise." The sun's upper edge was already visible. People turned toward the black carriage. Blue light shone between its doors. The stolen power made its wheels sink into the stone. Savin did not deny the number. "The capital barrier protects 8 million people," he said. "Elemental storms press against our borders every winter. This city contributes 1 million units each year, so the capital can keep those storms away. Your academy receives gold, medicine, and military protection in return. His motive was larger than Velor's. It contained millions of lives. It still depended on stealing from people who had never been told. Then show them the bill, I said. Let this city choose what it gives. Do not hide the pipe inside a sacred flag. The phrase crossed 30,000 white screens. Savin looked at the crowd and understood that the legal trial had ended. He reached beneath his coat. The forced harvest doubled. 2,000 units tore from the flag each minute. The central crest split. Wind burst from the tower. Fire followed it. Ice covered 3 roofs. Healing light made old trees grow new branches through the stone. Thousands of stored properties began escaping through one wound. The crowd screamed. Savin pointed at me. There is your choice. Savin's coat formed a black blade that erased magical connections. I dropped beneath it as it cut the trial banner without touching the wood. You came because the capital lost control of its own cloth, I said. 3 more blades crossed the platform. The first erased heat resistance from 10 panels. The second stripped lightness from 6. Before the third reached my gray stitch, the ancient flag dropped one corner over me. Savin erased one of its remembered properties. Thousands remained. The calm voice inside my mind spoke. A veil is not cloth that hides one life. It is cloth that shelters many. Final path awakened. Lord of Veils. Every panel kept its old limit. What changed was my reach. I felt the entire network, Savin's coat, and the million memories inside the flag. They were not mine to command, so I asked, "Will you let me repair you?" The old voice answered through every thread. Yes. Naya pulled the healing band. 40 panels carried 240 units of restoration into the tear, and ancient threads began joining. Rovan tangled Savin's blade in his red coat, while Herrick, Joran, Berto, and the basement students held the other bands. The forced harvest continued through one black seam running from the flag, through Velor, and into Savin's coat. It strangled Velor when he tried to speak. A healing panel kept his throat open while a lightning guide grounded the punishment. 7 flags, he shouted. 7 academies feed the capital. The council ordered every harvest. Savin accelerated this one to destroy the evidence. His confession appeared across the city. Savin stopped trying to preserve authority. He released everything in his coat. Suppression covered the square. Spells failed and crystals darkened, but stored properties remained. Savin could erase one memory at a time. He could not make the entire city forget at once. I pulled the western band. 20 wind panels lifted me from the platform. I crossed the square above Savin's head, rose along the tower wall, and reached the torn crest. Below, I heard Berto shout, "The napkin is flying again." 30,000 frightened people laughed. It was a small sound at first. Then it spread. Fear lost one step. I placed both hands inside the torn seam. The black extraction thread lay beneath it. It was narrower than my finger and carried 2,000 units each minute. I could not tear it with strength. Savin's coat had taught me what property it feared. Nullification severed magical connections. One white panel struck by his first blade had preserved that moment before becoming raw. For less than a breath, it remembered how a connection felt when it ended. I wrapped that panel around the black thread. 6 units of nullification crossed the seam. The extraction stopped. The black carriage burst open in the square. 360,000 stolen units rushed backward. The lightning bands guided the first surge into the flag. Fire panels took the heat. Wind panels spread the pressure across the tower. 40 healing panels closed the crest as the returning power passed through it. The network reached its limit. One panel tore, then 10, then 50. Pain ran across my arms as if each piece were skin. Naya held the final band with both hands. 6 units left in the western seam, she shouted through our connection. Send them to the top. That releases the stored wind. Exactly. The last 6 units entered the tower flag. 300 years of preserved wind opened above the city. The giant cloth rose from the mast. It spread across the sky without tearing free. Fire became red light beneath it. Lightning became silver lines. Ice became a cool white mist. Excess pressure escaped upward as an aurora instead of downward through streets and homes. The flag released 48,000 unstable units into the empty sky. It kept the rest. The central seam closed. Silence ended. Every viewing crystal returned at once. They showed me hanging from the tower with both arms buried in white cloth. They showed Naya holding the final green band. They showed Velor alive without the black thread. They showed Savin standing beside an empty carriage while his coat unraveled from the collar downward. The inspector tried to hold it closed. The ancient flag remembered weight beneath him and wind above him. One white strip wrapped around his ankles and became heavy. Another caught his coat and became light. Savin rose upside down over the trial platform. His coat opened around his head like a black umbrella with anger problems. 30,000 witnesses watched the capital's highest inspector swing slowly above the evidence he had tried to destroy. Berto pointed his ladle at him. Combat potential, 0. The square exploded with laughter. Herrick laughed too. Rovan sat on the platform and laughed until he could not breathe. Even Velor covered his face. Joran restored the archive and read the charges. The council seal inside Savin's carriage confirmed every hidden order. Guards lowered the inspector into restraints while the crowd chanted. By noon, the numbers became official. The flag stabilized at exactly 1 million units. The Academy returned 360,000 stolen units to its barrier reserve. My new network had sacrificed 78 panels. 108 survived across the city. The Academy awarded me 300 gold from the Emergency Defense Fund. My total became 348 gold and 4 silver. Merchants offered more, but Naya made me sleep before I could sign anything. My student rank remained first. Joran added a new title beneath it, Independent Master of the First Weave. 43 shelter students received rooms and meals. Herrick lost his office. Rovan lost sponsor privilege but kept the place earned by his real score. Velor resigned and faced judgment for the choices the Black Thread had not forced. Savin left in the same evidence cart that had once carried Rovan. That evening, we returned to the basement. It no longer looked like a basement residence. Students had cleaned the walls and repaired the pipe. The footloom stood in a bright workshop with 3 long tables. Someone had placed my original silver scholarship badge in a wooden frame beside Berto's first white oven glove. Berto served breakfast for dinner because none of us had eaten in the morning. He fried eggs until the edges were crisp and the centers remained soft. There was smoked meat, buttered bread, roasted tomatoes, and a bowl of berry jam. He brought honey milk for Naya and strong tea for me. We ate in silence for the first few minutes. Warm bread required respect. Naya sat beside me instead of across the table. Her hands were wrapped in healing cloth after holding the final band. "You have 348 gold," she said. "You counted. I moved 300 into an account that you cannot spend on exploding looms." The old loom exploded only once. The seller was not proud of that number. Berto placed an apple cake between us. It was covered with butter, sugar, and slices of fruit baked until they turned gold. Naya cut 2 pieces. She gave me the larger one again. "For the burns?" I asked. "For listening when the flag asked." Her shoulder rested against mine. "The capital will come for the cloth," she said. "I know. The council will say Savin acted alone." "I know. The other flags may be worse." "Probably." She took my hand beneath the table. "Then I need a stronger laboratory." That was the closest either of us came to a confession. It was enough. Above the Academy, the restored flag moved in the evening wind. It no longer whispered in terror. Its old voice sounded tired, but peaceful. For 4 days the world had called my cloth trash. On the 5th, the city hung white fabric from every window. I had started with 1 square that failed after 6 units. I ended with a class that could feel a veil across an entire city, a workshop worth more than my old shelter, and 30,000 witnesses who knew exactly who had saved them. The main ranking board changed one final time before midnight. It removed combat potential, 0 from my record. I asked Joran to put it back. "Why?" he said. "It makes the rest funnier." The words returned beneath my first-place title. Students gathered to take copies. Naya and I climbed the central tower after dinner. The ancient flag lowered 1 narrow thread into my hand. A map entered my awareness. 7 white lights marked 7 academies between our city and the capital. Black extraction seams connected all of them to the council tower. 6 lights pulsed slowly. The 7th flashed red. A number appeared through the thread, not in a window, but as pressure counted by an old and frightened weave. 10 hours remained. Naya tightened her grip on my hand. Far beyond the horizon, another giant flag turned toward us. Then it screamed,